2020 sent us into a tailspin economically, politically, socially, and culturally. And the notion of being able to plan past a certain time is done. How do we future-proof our businesses and media strategies? How do we stay agile in a time of volatility? How do we remain competitive and drive value for customers? The media and marketing space has changed significantly over the past year due to COVID-19. Media budgets have reduced, consumer behaviors are changing rapidly, and nothing is predictable anymore. All we know for sure is that in 2021, the old rules no longer apply. A decade's worth of innovation has been triggered in just a few short months. The question is, how to survive and how to thrive. 70% of senior marketers say their budgets have been cut as a result of COVID-19, yet 76% are facing an increasing pressure to deliver leads since the COVID-19 outbreak. 87% of marketers agree customer needs and expectations are on the rise today more than ever before. And brands have been forced to adopt digital channels for product and service delivery as well as marketing. And with audience behaviors now more complex and difficult to decipher than ever, the past year has fundamentally reshaped how consumers live, work, shop, and play. Consumers want to support trustworthy brands and those that are able to adapt and support them should the worst happen. According to Rob Davis, President and CMO at Nova's Next, two growing marketer needs that were accelerated by the pandemic will extend into 2021: flexibility and customization. 80% of consumers say that they are more likely to do business with a company if it offers personalized experiences. Smart businesses understand that being transparent, authentic, and even vulnerable is smart marketing in 2021. How do we predict the unpredictable? The conversation starts now.
Very good morning to you wherever you're listening and watching us from. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. My name is Sia Sangweni. I'm Cliff Central's brand manager and show host. But this morning, I have the absolute privilege, the honor, and the sheer pleasure of being your moderator and MC in this conversation. We have a lot to get into, so thank you so much for joining us. If it's your first time here, well, where have you been? Secondly, I'll try not to judge. But thirdly, let me give you a rundown of what everything is about here. This is another Future of Media digitized event. But today we're looking at predicting the unpredictable. Sure knows we all need to know more about that in these times. You know, we'll be looking at things like being agile and expecting the unexpected and how that has taken a whole new meaning in 2020 and certainly in 2021. So that's why we're here. I think all predictions of how this year is going to pan out have been put on pause, and we all are left to re-strategize and to rethink everything we've come to know. So hopefully my esteemed panel will be able to help us out. Look, I kid you not, I'm here to take notes as well. So you and I will be learning from them as we go. An event like this, though, wouldn't be possible without our incredible partners and sponsors. So I want to give a shout out to them because they have made today possible. Thank you to Vodacom, Easy Ads, Prime Media Outdoor, The Media Shop, the folks at Tilt, and the Red Zone, and as well as the Media Online. So I hate to sound cliche, though, nor do I like to overuse words, but I think it is amazing how the state of our industries, whether you are behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, whether you're part of the people who are strategists or brand managers, putting what we do for our clients and consumers together. I think it is amazing that we have been through where we've been through, and we are still standing today. COVID-19 has undoubtedly, as we all know, accelerated the need for all of us and our businesses to become agile and adaptable. And this discussion will hopefully extend to discussing the challenges we've all come to experience, even the likes of what marketers have to do and how they adapt their brand strategies in these times as they plan for the future. It really is a guessing game, but hopefully with a conversation like this, we'll be able to usher things forward. So what are the standout features that you can say will be what we see in the new normal? And where do we go from here on out? And what do we concentrate on? And a lot of these questions will be answered over the next 45 to 50 minutes of this conversation. But we want to hear from you as well. Please join in on social media wherever you are. But particularly, we want you to join in our live chat as well by answering the question, what predictions do you have for the industry this year? We really want to hear from you. We'll be adding that to the conversation as we go. So a lot to discuss, but without wasting any more time, let's get straight into it. And it gives me great honor and pleasure to introduce to you my esteemed panel of guests, undoubtedly some of the coolest, smartest people around. First up is someone who has worked with, again, one of the coolest, or some of the coolest brands rather, around, like 5FM and Coca-Cola Africa, and most recently another cool brand, Nando's. Now get this, she actually joined Nando's 3 weeks before South Africa went into lockdown. So let me say, I don't know how she did it, but she's the general manager of brand and strategy at Nando's. It's Justine Cullinan. Good morning, Justine.
Good morning, Sia. Thank you for that fantastic intro.
No problem. It's only a pleasure. Look, and then next up is Lorraine Landon. She is the Sub-Saharan Africa Specialist Lead at Google. She is among the experts in different digital domains to create solutions for Google's biggest clients on the continent. How are you, Lorraine?
Very well, thanks, Sia. Lovely to be here.
Looking forward to chatting to you. And again, no stranger to the Future of Media audience. I'm always pleased to get to pick his brain and get talking to him. It's Eben Gevers, Head of Sales and Trade Marketing at Arena Holdings. Eben is one of those people who you can listen to talk for the longest of times. You never get bored, and that's because of the wealth of knowledge that he has. A veteran of the industry who's seen things in print, in television, in digital, and as well integrated media solutions. Eben, how are you this morning?
I'm fantastic, Sia. Thank you for that fantastic introduction. Except every time I hear the word veteran, I immediately think, oh my word, am I that old now? But thank you very much for that.
Give me 2 seconds. We'll reshape it, okay? We'll think of something else.
No, I'm happy with that. Thank you so much.
And then last but definitely not least, Natalie Katz. She's an award-winning brand and digital strategist. She's currently at VML, Y&R. She is the senior strategic planner there. She builds businesses by asking powerful questions. So I think this will be different for her, where we get to ask her those powerful questions. Natalie, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Sia, and good morning, everyone else. I'm so excited to be on this panel. Thank you for the great introduction.
Great stuff. Well, let's just kick things off by setting the scene a little. Lorraine, I want to come to you first to try to make sense of everything that has been happening. How did, in your experience and in things that you have seen, how did 2020 change a lot of consumer demands? And how did that prepare you for 2021?
So yeah, I think the way that we assess the impact of 2021 is just to ask and look at the data in terms of how the consumers are feeding into the digital realms. And I'm a strategist by trade, and so I've always used Google Trends as a means to understand a dipstick analysis of how people are feeling. And so Google itself has run an analysis across 23 markets in terms of what is the impact, what is the change in terms of how consumers are working. And there's been some really interesting kind of changes that we've seen over the course of the last year. The one thing is that now people trapped in their homes, they can't go to the stores to window shop. So there's a lot of a change to go to look for ideas and inspiration, as opposed to just going to product. Now looking to brands to create content around what is the inspiring things that they can do, particularly in the little confines of the space that they occupy now. There's a lot more consideration in terms of who they're buying from. So we've seen huge rises in the searches around near me, around local, supporting local, making sure that South Africans are supported, South African businesses. And you can see that just the other day I went to Pick n Pay and I saw clothing. You can see the little sticker that says made locally. There's this huge emphasis on how do we support our local businesses, because we all understand the impact that that's having on our small businesses. Obviously, and I think this is a conversation that's been had across the board, regardless of whether you're in marketing or not, but the emphasis on discounting, cost efficiencies, there's less cash flow. So we've seen a huge spike in the word best. So people are looking for the value, they're looking for the word best, coupled with the word promo code. So there's been a very substantial spike there. And then what's quite interesting is the extensive concentration on delivery options from a consumer's perspective. Once again, we're all stuck in our homes. So it's imperative that the businesses are focusing on how they get the goods to the consumer. So 2019, it was okay to wait 2 or 3 days for a delivery. Now there's an emphasis on how do I get it? And you can see that through the proliferation of these like 66 Chickers, 60/60 app, the way that you can get same day delivery. And there's going to be more and more pressure on businesses to be able to deliver in a shorter space of time. And then there's and this is, I think, the clincher for 2021 is the demand to be dynamic. And the consumers are looking to brands to actually be responding before they do, which is an interesting kind of symbiotic relationship, because the consumers are informing how the brands should be responding to this. So there are ways of making sure that the businesses know what data they're looking at from their perspective, how are they looking at their customers, but also what is the general population saying in terms of how they are talking to the digital realm. People are telling us lots and lots of things all the time. So it's been really interesting to see.
Interesting, yes, but I also feel like this is a little too personal. I don't know who your consumers are that you're reaching, but for now it seems like you were looking at what I was doing.
I promise you it was.
Yes, and delivering that and just stuffing my face with junk. And my definition of the demand to be dynamic is more an affirmation I tell myself in the morning than any trend.
It just makes you feel part of a community.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for reassuring that, being reassuring for me. Even for you, it is a buzzword, but it is so apt. How did you learn to be more agile over the past couple of months?
Well, I think the key is that every organization obviously has like a long-term plan, right? So you sketch it out over a 5-year plan, an 8-year plan, whatever. But I think, and then obviously within that, you need to have certain variables that you can twist and tweak so that you can actually be a bit more agile. But what happened last year is we took our 5-year plan and we compressed it literally into like a couple of months plan. And we said, oh boy, now what do we do? And all the variables that were involved there all of a sudden took on a life of their own. You know, it's like everything from a micro thing, like people working from home. How do we facilitate that process of making sure that our people are actually happy at home and have everything they need, to client expectations in terms of actually getting your products in front of people. Everything changed. But I think the key with all of this is to not be too set in your way. You have to be able to say, okay, everything's changing and I'm going to make certain mistakes. It is what it is. I'm going to make certain mistakes. And as long as I fail fast and I fail quickly and I get back on my feet, that's the key. So I think that old rigid mindset of saying like, you know, I'm too scared to make a mistake, I'm too scared to invest in a certain thing is out the window. You have to actually just throw things at the wall, see what sticks and move on from there. But what I really did appreciate was the fact that all of our teams kind of came to the party. There was this community thinking almost where nobody said, oh boy, you know, the bosses will do this or these people will do that. Everybody was in on the whole thing, trying to just make it work. And I firmly believe, and this is going to sound very, I suppose maybe a bit optimistic, but I firmly believe that this society and also companies are going to be far better off after this thing, because there's this a completely different thinking that's happening, as opposed to just kind of having this hierarchical thing where the bosses do this and I do this because I get a salary. It's out the window now, I think.
Justine, jumping off Eben's point, how did 2020 teach you to structure and sometimes restructure your campaigns on the fly?
Yeah, I think that what Eben says about agility is 100% the case, and you can't be married to your plans. Your plans are supposed to guide you. They're supposed to help you deliver for the brand. And when they don't do that anymore, then they are plans that can be thrown out the window. So you can't be married to what we wanted to see, what we did plan to do. You've got to be able to adjust as you go. And it's an opportunity when the path changes for you to change your plan. It's actually quite fun to do. I had a lot of fun last year in changing the plan completely in terms of what we wanted to do. And you'll surprise yourself with how capable your team can be and your brand can be when it's necessary. So I think that agility is about changing your plans. It's about failing forward and giving people an opportunity to try different things. And progress is far more important than perfection.
Ooh, I'm already getting like a quote a minute here. I'm already seeing my next Instagram captions courtesy of you, Justine. Thank you. Natalie, for you, what are some of your top lessons that you learned from last year?
Sure. So last year I had a very interesting year. I, moved from being a strategist in the agency to actually moving over to client side because they needed the help because of so much change. So to me, the one key lesson was that strong relationships really, really matter. And because, you're not in a room with people anymore, it really is about building that rapport and being able to pick up the phone and say, this is what I'm thinking, or I don't think you're right, maybe try this. So, the strong relationships are so, so key. And it's also, strong relationships with your clients, but also with your team, and being able to build those rituals where you can, really balance life and work. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest lessons I learned from last year. Which kind of leads me to my next lesson. Balance really matters. And I've, from a personal perspective, that's probably one of my biggest ethos. And I actually read a really interesting article on TED Talks the other day, and they actually speak that there's 7 different types of rest. And, from physical rest, from active rest to, doing yoga or Pilates, or passive rest, which is actually sleeping and taking a nap when you can, to emotional rest and just kind of getting away from the people who drain you. Because let's face it, we are on screens 24/7. It is extremely draining. And, creative rest, we all in the creative industry, and we all expected to, push a button and then there's these big ideas, but that does not, that's not what happens. And, going outside and going on hikes and cooking, I love to cook and be with my plants. So, I think rest is really, really important. And then, last but not least, it's actually about, being open to change. And I think, Justine and Eben also mentioned it. And, the quote from Bruce Lee comes to mind, be like water, it's about being formless and, being open up to the endless opportunities for change. Water, when it's in a teapot, it becomes a teapot. When it's in a cup, it becomes a cup. And I think that's probably one of the most important takeouts from last year, is that you can't be tied to a plan, and you got to be like water.
Ooh. Girl, Lorraine, I need to call you on a Monday morning when I can't get out of bed. I need to call you when it's time to go to gym, and I just can't do it. Those are great lessons. Thank you. Lorraine, where do you see where we are going now, and where do you see content formats emerging and evolving?
I don't think it's so much a question of like format, rather than making use of the formats that already exist and playing around and being creative within them. So you'll see that there is a lot of emphasis within the video space. Like the point of fact, this conference is now being held across many platforms. So it's about taking what we experienced in the offline world and now making it a lot more digital. So you can see that in these conferences, you can see it in concerts. So lots of live streams. But what we're also seeing is things that you never thought possible to bring into the digital realm are now becoming part of the course. And actually, I don't think it's a case of an emergency, let's just quickly put it on digital, and when everything reverts, it'll be back to normal. I think there are some really beautiful things to explore within this digital realm. An example is my 8-year-old daughter is part of Cubs, and she's now doing scouts and having sessions online, but then able to bring people into her garden and to really experience that. And I think for a brand, it's important to know how, not just to take what was offline and stick it on there, but to explore the creative ways in which the formats and the content help. I've seen some really beautiful executions with some of our clients who are actually marrying that demand for what the consumers want in terms of the value and the understanding and inspiration, and then making use of the platforms that are available in order to communicate in a lot more meaningful ways.
Got you. Eben, this is a question from the audience, and I think you'd be able to answer it. Someone asks, how is the informal sector and low-income consumers engaging in the digital space? How have you noticed that?
So obviously, the first thing, there's two aspects to this. The first one is obviously as a consumer of content, the big thing for you is data, right? So it's basically having access and making sure that you don't have to make a call between a loaf of bread or data so that you can consume the content. So we found very interesting stats before all of this nonsense happened, was that some of our sites would see spikes at about, say, 7:30 in the morning, and then at about 4:30 in the afternoon, they would drop again. And that was clearly an indication that people were surfing the net or consuming content at the office. That's all changed now. So now we see a much more consistent access to it. And I think it's because there's been this huge revolution to make data more freely available, cheaper. There's free Wi-Fi hotspots and those kind of things. So the informal sector is definitely accessing data in that way, I think. And I also think that the engagement is slightly different in terms of the type of content that people want. So once again, the word agility comes in. As big giant publishers, for us is to just constantly on the fly figure out what content people want, what they're consuming at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday, and what's interesting to them at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, and then pushing that information out to them. So that's from a consumer point of view, but also from a marketing point of view. If you are running a little business in the informal sector, we find that digital gives you a huge amount more access because it's just more affordable. So, than some of the other platforms, and print, radio, etc. So we're finding a lot more smaller clients engaging with us, wanting to buy more digital than any of the other platforms. And also, so we're giving access to more people to actually be able to get into the market.
Right. Justine, so we discussing being dynamic, we're discussing agility, we're discussing moving and working on the fly in some cases. But how do brands right now still work on their longer term brand equity?
Yeah, that's a lovely question. I'm a little bit worried if people are not always working on their brand equity. So it might be the case that some people feel that they need to reinvest, and they've been through a period whereby they've done something else from an objective perspective. But at the end of the day, all brands come back to equity. And I always like to think of brand equity like a reservoir, so in order to have a stream that flows, in order for us to be able to fish and swim and whatever we're doing in the stream, we have to pour in at the top of the reservoir. And the top of the reservoir must remain full, otherwise the entire stream dries up. So I think that it's incredibly important to invest in your brand equity on a day-to-day basis. Even if you have a particular more short-term objective that you're trying to meet, it's important to continually reinvest in those equity projects and brand related campaigns in order to remind the consumer why they buy from you. So we can get very caught up in terms of what we're doing and when we're doing it and by how much we're doing it. And the equity investment is about the why. Why do we exist? Why is it that we can charge what we charge for the products that we have or the services that we offer? And we have to remind the consumer of why that is the case. I mean, I'm sure everyone knows that Nando's is not super cheap. we don't sell cheap chicken, that's for sure. But there are a number of really important reasons why that's the case. We don't import cheap chicken and feed you stuff that's bad for you. We have quite significant standards. And we, as a result, invest heavily and regularly in reminding the consumer why they want to buy from us and what they can obtain from us.
Mm-hmm. I got you, Justine. Natalie, what tools and tactics have you come to adopt that you can share with us on how to make changes faster in these times?
So I think coming specifically from, a digital background, that's where, VML or native, as it used to be called, was born from. And I think, really tapping into social listening and, especially, Lorraine, from what you're speaking about, Google Trends and, how people are searching is so important to keep your finger on the pulse. Without social listening and understanding what your audiences are going through, then it's very hard, to keep up, to date and to give them, content or solutions or campaigns that they need or ultimately want to buy. And I also think, from a tools perspective, sure, it's a lot to do with ways of working. And I think, because we're working from home, inter-agency work is becoming a lot more important, especially, knowing your boundaries. Huge clients have about 9 or 10 different agencies, and it's really about, it's like, slaying in your lane, and that, those ways of working is extremely important. And, analytics and reporting tools to monitor change is probably one of the most important things, but it's also about taking those observations and insights and being able to integrate them into your actions. It's all very well having this Excel spreadsheet of, of observations, but if you're not integrating it and adapting and being agile, then what's the point? And then, I think another really important thing is Scrum. And, I almost want to say Scrum, because if you're not communicating with your teams and you're not optimizing as you go, then you get left behind, and then you only kind of reflect once the campaign's over and you're like, oh damn, I should have done that. So I think from a Scrum perspective, every morning we meet with our teams, understand what's coming on, ahead in the day, and then we can plan. So yeah, social listening, tools and analytics, ways of working, and scrumming.
Lorraine, let's look towards 2021 now and beyond. What are some of the digital behaviors that we can start to look out for?
Well, aside from those amazing ones that Natalie has just outlined, because I think that Scrum. No, I think from a consumer perspective, it's very much tied to what we've been looking at, what I've been mentioning in terms of the trends and how people have been making use of the formats and platforms, is that bringing the outside into the inside. So I found this stat and I thought it was so interesting that there's been a 25% increase on YouTube on videos for nature sounds globally. And this is the thing is how people are trying to bring what was outside inside, and how do we make our existence richer with the use of digital. So it's been really quite interesting. If you see some of the businesses have pivoted to actually making while they can't actually sell their wares digitally, like you've seen restaurants. I don't know if anyone saw David Higgs of Marvel fame, how he created a whole community on Friday nights just playing 30 seconds, but created some brand affinity and love and a very loyal client base digitally creating these connections with people. And I think what we're seeing is the outside coming in. It's like the connections that you have, the fact that we sit and look at each other's eyes 24 hours, sometimes it feels like that, a day when you're sitting and having VCs. We're yearning for those connections, and there's all this kind of content that we're putting in there to make it feel like it's normal, like we are living our life. I don't know how many photos I've seen of people having cut their husband's hair or their own hair. And these, like, it becomes all these content kind of inputs around how do I take what I knew and make it mine. And there's a lot to work with there and I use the word creativity because I think the digital platform is so amazing in terms of how we can be creative. And that's what I've been delighting in over the course of the last year. It's been hard, but I've loved that sense of spark and spunkiness when brands have gone, I'm going to look at it differently and I'm going to tap into what people need and the kind of what they're looking for and how we make those connections.
Yeah, when we are hearing about scrumming, we're hearing about connection. I think a lot of that has to do with now how important collaboration has been more than ever before. How do you see the role of collaboration in these times that we're in?
Look, the point is that everything has changed, or a significant amount of things have changed, and any organization has to realize that they might not necessarily have all the expertise for everything that we're going through right now. So the step one is obviously to look within an organization to actually see what skill sets live where and how to put it together. And then separately to that is I've seen some amazing collaborations between different companies that have nothing to do with each other, actually leaning on each other to get through this. And once again, it's that mindset shift to actually say, perhaps this isn't it. Perhaps in order to meet the demand of the consumer, I actually have to admit that I'm not so great at one thing and somebody else is. So step one is to literally look within your organization and see who does what well and lean on that person or that team or that department. And then secondly, actually have a look externally and say, who can we lean on? Who can we partner? So we run a very interesting business where a sizable portion of it is on the print side of things. You know, Sunday Times, Business Day, Surefooted, Financial Day, etc. And you have to consider that we are in charge of producing the content for the publication and laying it out and doing all that. But subsequent to that, it's in the hands of other people. You know, once we press the button to print it, that's a different company. Once they printed it, to distribute it, that's a different company. Even the person delivering it to your house or your business park or your office park is a different person. So we've always been good at collaboration, and it's not a relationship of a service provider and somebody who pays. You can't treat it like that. You have to say we're in this together in order for us all to continue making money. And we've just taken that philosophy and we've leaned within the company even to see who else can do what. So a balance sheet is a scary thing because you look at your balance sheet for your department and you say, oh, I need to make a lot of money and I need to save certain things here. But you have to always throw it out and actually see who else you can play with and have like a virtual balance sheet, if you want to call it that. So even within our organization, we have a TV business, we have a print business, we have a digital business, and we've just gone, you know, that makes no sense. A consumer wants a solution, a reader wants to get content, and where that content comes from, where it lives, it doesn't really matter. Like, let's all play in the same pond and actually just try and get through all of this and make sure that the consumers are. So collaboration is absolutely vital, and you have to almost take your ego and put it in your pocket and say, right, boys and girls, let's start over.
Evan, I hear you, but I tossed you that ball and I was waiting for you to break out into song. There was a lean on me, and a strong moment. Okay, we didn't get there. Multiple hands in kumbaya and sing about that later. Justine, here's a question from our audience. Someone asked, how do we continue to sell to consumers, but also be considerate about, or rather considerate of the times that we're in? And where is that line in our communications to audiences?
Yeah, that's definitely also about the why. The why hasn't changed. People still need to eat. People still need content to entertain themselves and to be informed. everyone on this panel is running a business, and the reason that their business exists is because we have a product or service that the consumer wants. The why actually hasn't changed. So while the landscape might have, while the priorities might have, the need that anyone has is still definitely there. And I think if you are building your empathetic muscle instead of your technical competence at a time like this, then you are listening. And, I'm often talking to people about the difference between listening and hearing. Hearing is gathering a bunch of information and data. Listening is understanding that to the point where you can use it to usher the future in. And that's what marketers do. If you look at everyone else in your business, they're looking backwards. They're using historical information to try and plan. They're reporting on stuff that's already happened, or they're living in the now. My operations team lives in the now. Now, how many meals are we serving? Now, how many customers are happy or not happy with what they're getting at Nando's? And it is the marketer that has to usher in the future. What next? And I think that's an incredible privilege to have. So if you understand your consumer to the level that you're really listening to them and you're really empathetic towards what they're doing, then you don't have to worry about how you're communicating with them, because you're part of them. Nando's built its brand that way. We are of the people. We are by the people. We are not set up on a pedestal delivering services that we're selling to you, whether you like it or not. It is what the people want, and we serve them. We listen to what they have, what they need, and we interpret their needs and build our products and service around that.
Yeah. Natalie, would you agree with that?
100%. I think, the thing about brand purpose or brand equity is that if you understand your brand purpose and you are, and you've laid the foundation, or, we like to call them chapter plans, if you must, it's so easy to be able to adapt and to, let new possibilities in, because you know what you stand for. I think the brands, or even people that don't know what they stand for, then you become wishy-washy, and then you don't know who you're speaking to, or you don't know who you're appealing to. So I think it's so important, and like you said, to be future focused and to be, in touch with culture. You like to say, like, being within culture, actually, and not trying to create it. It's actually about listening and understanding what people want and giving it to them. And I also think, the most important thing as marketers that we sometimes forget is that we're speaking to humans first and not their wallets. And especially in these times when people are feeling so vulnerable, that we need to, like you said, Justine, we really need to be empathetic. And that's where, the insights come in, and really understanding who we are speaking to and what are their pain points and how we can solve them. If we come and we show up every single day by showing how we can help them, then you have a winning formula. So yeah, be future focused and, really listening to your consumers and what they want.
Right. And another reminder to you, wherever you're watching us from, please, we want to hear from you. So please continue to send us your questions and your comments, and specifically answering what predictions do you have for the industry this year? We want to hear more about that. But Lorraine, when we get to encouraging more online conversations, here's a question from the audience that lends to that. They ask, how effective is influencer marketing in reaching your target market? Bum, bum, bum.
Bum, bum, bum. So as a strategist, I think there are many layers to how you're building, how you're communicating. So influencer marketing, I think, and it's by no means my realm of expertise within Google, but if I were to speak from a strategist position, I think we're in the business of communication. So influencers are really good at identifying those pockets of communication when you're further down that funnel, when you've identified small pockets and niches and identified topics that are important to groups of people that align with the influencer. I don't think it's a strategy to completely put it in and have an influencer carry the flag for a whole campaign, because I don't think any influencer would want to say, well, I stand for everything. There are, and I saw it, I mentioned it earlier in the data, where people are really wanting to align with things, really wanting to, for the brands that they buy into, to stand for something, to support something, to be worth something. So when it comes to the influencers, it's important that it aligns with that, and that it actually resonates with the consumer, as opposed to riding a wave of fame, which I think we've seen in years gone by. I think there's a lot more opportunity now to have more meaningful and authentic conversations, and especially because we're all sitting now in our own rooms, in our own houses, and everyone gets to see it. And everyone gets to see it. Like, we might all be beautifully dressed up here, but, maybe I'm wearing my pajamas. There's the sense of, we're all a little bit more real, and we're all a little bit more honest, hopefully. And I think that's where the influencer marketing could really be resonant with consumers, is that it aligns with the values of a brand.
Mm-hmm. Eben, here's a question to you from the audience. Is traditional marketing dying, or is digital and traditional combined together to form this new normal?
I love it. So I've always been an advocate of saying that one single solution will never work. Everything that we do needs to be a multi-purpose solution. So what I mean by that is that a consumer isn't a single-minded thing. You don't just watch TV. You don't just listen to radio. You don't just follow influencers on Instagram. You're a multi-faceted person, and therefore there's plenty of opportunities to interact with you. So I don't think it's dying at all. I think just like with everything in our past, things evolve, things change. As there's more options, people are going to be making use of those options, etc. From my point of view, I think it's an understanding of content, and actually saying that perhaps publishers of content, whatever kind of content it is, needs to be platform agnostic. Don't think of like, oh, you're a radio company, or you are whatever. The point is that you're creating content. You need to serve that content in different ways so that the consumer can get to it in different ways. So the short answer is no, don't think it's dying. I think it's evolving just like everything else that we've seen in our history. Simple.
Right. Justine, I see you nodding away. Do you want to quickly add to that?
Yeah, so that also comes of my 7.5 years working in the media industry. And that's a question of how, and how changes all the time. So how we connect with our consumers and our customers and our audiences can evolve forever. It's wonderful the way people change their consumption patterns and what they use in order to understand things better. So the concept of classical marketing is about building brands and reaching consumers where they're at. Where they're at changes. And that is how we as great brand leaders and agency heads are always trying to evolve our own plans. So the need doesn't change, the why doesn't change. And that's kind of like a bedrock of safety that you can feel like, well, people are always going to need our products and services. It's just, where are we going to find them, and how are we going to grab their attention so that they care? I call this like the marketing echo chamber. We always, as brands, we kind of get into this mode of going, I know all these things about my brand, and it's very clear in my picture, in my head, what everyone is doing from a Nando's perspective. But any individual person doesn't live inside the Nando's brand like I do. Right? They don't know everything and why we've made all these decisions and why this month's menu is white and green because spring has got such a color palette or whatever it might be. They don't care or understand that. So I have to evolve the way in which I connect with the consumer, where I find them, and meet them where they're at. That's the thing that changes all the time.
Another question to you, Justine, but I'd also like to hear your take on it, Natalie. So for both of you, how do you deal with ego when it comes to resetting and reassigning and realigning your goals or your tasks or your partnerships? Is there a trick to it, as Eben was alluding to a little earlier?
I don't think there's a trick to it. I think that if you're really empathetic and listening, then you don't have an ego. You know, no one ever got fired for being average. So it kind of makes sense to be brave. You know, on our best days at Nando's, we're brave and courageous, and we probably have a better hit rate than a lot of other brands do, because where we can really take a couple of great risks. We don't get it right every single time. And I think that builds for putting your ego on the back burner. Ego contributes negatively to the triple bottom line in any business in the world. And if you're sophisticated in your marketing approach, then you are automatically humbled, because your job is to be the custodian of the consumer in the business. Your job as a marketer is to represent the voice and the need of the consumer in your company. So if you're not understanding them, and if you're not putting them first, and you're using your ego to drive your own agenda or build your own career or whatever your objective might be, you're failing the consumer. And that is a failure of marketing.
Natalie, what do you have to say about ego?
Sure, Justine, you took the words completely out of my mouth there. Yeah, I completely agree. And I also think from an agency perspective, you know, you almost are, you are on the back foot because you're serving your clients. And I think the most important thing there is, which comes back to kind of one of my biggest lessons from last year, is how important strong relationships are. And, you know, with a strong relationship, you're able to break down those ego barriers to say, actually, I don't think you're right because of X, Y, and Z. And being able to be within culture and consistently learning and evolving yourselves, you're able to really kind of stand up in the face of ego and say, no, that's not right. You should be doing X, Y, and Z. And staying true to yourself, I think that is really important. You know, in this creative industry, there are so many egos with their big heads and their, Air Max, Nike Air Maxes, prancing around town.
Hey, what did a good sneaker do? Why?
Sorry. I love them. I have so many, but, I just wanted to paint a picture. But I think it's just about being yourself and standing up to nonsense and putting people in their place and making sure that you're staying true to the brand too. Yeah.
Lorraine, here's a question for you from the audience. Someone asks, do you think that the death of the cookie and third-party tracking will influence programmatic advertising in the industry? And how will this impact publishers then?
So yes, it will definitely impact. I think it's a hot topic at the moment. It's what we talk about with our clients on a daily basis, and I think it's timely. We need to all have conversations around privacy and being responsible with data. So yes, the way that it's working, it has worked in the past. It's obviously going to change. It's going to mean that we don't rely so heavily on third-party data, but actually we're putting a lot of emphasis on the brands understanding their client base. So looking at their first-party data and being responsible with that. In terms of how it's impacting the publishers, we haven't fully explored all of that yet. I think there's a lot of conversations happening with various teams. I think what we are just driving as I think an internet community is the responsibility piece and how there is a safety factor in terms of how we're all interacting online. So I speak a lot about how are we learning about what people are telling us within the digital space, but it's also what they are imparting and how we are being custodians of that. So there's a bit to work through in this next year. Obviously, we've got Poppy coming in June. So there is a lot of conversation that's happening. It's actually sitting within my team. And so the integration of that comes very heavily with another part of the focus is how do we know our audiences and working out the balance of that. Obviously, there's algorithmic solutions and all the kind of data science that goes behind that'll probably bore your socks off right now. But I think it's just like we were talking about being agile in all the previous questions. I think this is a an opportunity for the digital community to also exercise agility and to go, how might we look at this differently?
Right. There's a lot to mention and to take into account as we move more into this year. Eben, a question for you now. What are some practical ways you've personally discovered that you can share with us around mining and discovering unique insights within your company?
I think it comes down to, like, I like these kind of questions because it really makes you think about people, right? So it makes you think about skill sets and who's got what, etc. But for me, it comes down to three things. It's listen, acknowledge, honest, reward. You know, if an idea is kick-ass, if it's an amazing idea that actually has merit for the company, then reward that person. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a financial reward. Times are tough, but there are ways of actually rewarding people. So for me, it really comes down to step one, just listen. Just actually listen to people. And once again, the discussion about ego, forget about the ego. That information, that idea could have come from anybody. And it doesn't have to be a hierarchical discussion. You're a strategist, so you do strategy. You're a writer, so you only write. You're a photographer, the answer is no. People consume, I mean, people are out there, they're seeing different things. And so the question is really just how to make sure that within your organization, you have the ability to listen, acknowledge, and then reward those people.
Right. In wrapping things up, I'd like to just go to each of you for your final word on today's topic and what you see unfolding over the next couple of months as well. Just final thoughts. Let me start with you, Justine.
So I think that we need to be very aware of the fact that last year was a crisis, and this year we're going through the natural depression that comes after a crisis. So in the time of a depression, it's incredibly important to use your time effectively in making sure that you truly understand the consumer's needs. And if that means changing course, if that means we don't do things the way we did 2 years ago or what worked last year, then you have to have the courage and the brevity to do that effectively. And that is, I think, an opportunity and something exciting to look forward to, as opposed to something to deal with or cope with.
Right. Natalie, your last words?
Sure, there's so much. I think from going forward, the three kind of things that are really important to me, especially coming from a digital kind of, content background, is, really focusing on insights and speaking to people and not letting, you being in your room or in your house stopping you from actually getting those insights. And also tapping into meaningful conversations, no matter what, what brand you work for or, what agency you're from. I think, the most important thing besides paid media, it's actually investing in meaningful conversations, active community management, listening, really being proactive in terms of how to create meaningful conversations, and then creating compelling content that is scalable, sociable, and shareable. You want, tapping into and creating that social currency is something that, brands, if they can get that right, and they really will get it right. And I think, brands like Nando's are probably, the gods of, social currency. And we really should take a page out of, how Nando's are doing things. So that's kind of from me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Lorraine, your final words?
To swing on what my the two previous comments have been, I think the communication and the meaningfulness of it actually is rooted in a new desire for authenticity. And what we can see is when brands force, there was at the beginning of lockdown last year, there was a whole lot of questions from our clients around how do we pivot? How do we start mentioning this unprecedented time? And our response was, because we don't know it all, but it was all around how do you in the capacity of your brand respond in a meaningful and an authentic way? And sometimes, and it's about those conversations, it's also about sense checking to make sure that the conversations and the data that you're getting out of those is also true. So the one thing that I apply a healthy dose of skepticism in terms of surveys and things like that, because a few years ago I read a book called Everybody Lies, and it's about how go nuts. It's about how people will often state something because they know it's what needs to be heard, as opposed to what they're secretly searching for. And I think there's this sense checking that needs to be done in terms of what is really meaningful for a brand to leverage in terms of having that conversation, as opposed to what's popular and what's the in thing to talk about, because that's when it doesn't ring quite true with the consumers.
Awesome. And then Eben, your last word this morning.
So, you know, I pretty much in my personal capacity banned the phrase new normal. I hate that phrase, I can't stand it. But to be perfectly honest, that desire to go back to the way things used to be will always be prevalent for humans. Like we want to go back to what was safe, what we knew, etc. But I think as businesses, we have to realize that things have dramatically changed, and there's opportunity in that. You know, look around for the opportunity. The likes of the Checker 66s of the world, for example, came out of absolutely nowhere and just built this entire brand on convenience and the new normal. So I think just look around within your business for opportunities that speak to where we are at the moment, that need for immediate gratification, that need for being entertained, that need to get away from a screen every now and then, that need to be closer to people without having to hop on a Zoom call. There's plenty of opportunities within that. And I think businesses can properly leverage that. We're in a fortunate position at the company that I represent, at Avina Holdings, where we make a significant amount of content. And content is beautiful to create because you're giving people exactly what they're asking for. You know, gone are the days of just throwing things at people. Now we see the trends, we see what people are interacting with, etc. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. Is actually just that understanding that there's opportunities within this situation we find ourselves in at the moment.
Great. Thank you so much, Eben. And that's exactly why you are the guru, not veteran, right? Does guru sound better?
The check is in the mail, here. The check is in the mail.
There we go. We're rounding things up in the best way possible. A big thank you to my panelists for joining me this morning. There's been great insight there and great learnings you've made this morning, such a breeze, and to learn from all of you has been incredible. We've got opportunities, learned about collaborating and the importance of collaborating. We've learned about how to forge fast-paced changes. And then, thank you, Natalie, we also learned that people judge you based on your sneakers. So big thanks to all of you. Justine Cullinan, GM for Brand and Strategy at Nando's, Lorraine Landon, Sub-Saharan African Specialist Lead at Google, Eben Geerwes, Head of Advertising, Sales and Trade Marketing at Arena Holdings, and Natalie Katz, Senior Strategic Planner at VMLY&R. And big thank you one more time to our sponsors who made this possible this morning. Thank you to Vodacom, Easy Ads, Prime Media Outdoor, The Media Shop, Tilt, The Red Zone, and The Media Online. And a big thank you to you, wherever you joined us from this morning, for making it matter. Thank you so much for sending through your comments and your questions and engaging with us. You've been absolutely incredible. And hopefully we'll get to see you at our next event as well. The next Future of Media Digitized event will be taking place on the 17th of March. So you can put that into your calendars right now. And if you want to register and attend, you can visit www.quicklink.co.za/FOM, that's Future of Media 2020. So www.quicklink.co.za/FOM 2020. Other than that, from my side, Seth Godin, thank you very much for being here this morning. It's been absolutely great to engage with you as your master of ceremonies. I'll see you on cliffcentral.com anytime after this. Have a great one.